Zimbabwe. Mukoma wako uchamuponda, uchimupondera nyaya yebato. Mukoma wako uchamuponda wani, uchimupondera nyaya yenyika. Hanzvadzi yako wakairova, uchirovera nyaya yebato.
Is letter from America.
Nyaya yebato. Mwana wako wakamutuka, uchimutukira nyaya yenyika. Ndiyo ere Zimbabwe, 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 ndiyo ere Zimbabwe. Zimba makadzipisa, muchidzidzisira nyaya yebato. Chikafu munovanyima, muchivanyimira nyaya yebato. Minda yavo makaitora, muchiitorera nyaya yebato. Ndiyo ere Zimbabwe, ndiyo ere Zimbabwe, ndiyo ere Zimbabwe, ndiyo ere Zimbabwe. Diare Zimbabwe, diare Zimbabwe, diare Zimbabwe, amaiwe Zimbabwe, diare Zimbabwe, amaiwe Zimbabwe. Mukoma wako wakamuponda, uchimupondera nyaya yebato. Mukoma wako uchamurova, uchimurovera nyaya yenyika. Mombe dzake uchadzitora, uchidzitorera nyaya yebato. Vanhu makavarova, uchivarovera nyaya yebato. Ndiyo ere Zimbabwe, 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 ndiyo ere Zimbabwe. Papa Zimbabwe, Chokora Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe.
Topic: a long march for the CCC-led final Chimurenga, challenges and opportunities. One objective fact that practically everyone agrees on is that the CCC has become a towering political giant in Zimbabwe. Given the fact that it is a 3-month-old baby, CCC is in exactly the same powerful and influential position as the MDC led by Tsvangirai after 2000 and especially the 2008 elections. And given a level electoral playing field, CCC would, like the UPND in Zambia last year, be expected to roll to a landslide victory in the 2023 elections. If only this is possible, if only the electoral playing field is level. That is a big condition. But there are other big factors at play in Zimbabwean politics that will determine who rules Zimbabwe after any elections. And there are also potentially countervailing factors that will redefine the political direction in the country. We will review 2 of them in today's letter from America. First, is the resilience of the opposition MDC and the CCC in face of the ZANU-PF politically motivated violence as an instrument of implementing its stated democratic centrism policy to stay in power indefinitely. Second, lessons learned from events that resulted especially from the 2008 general election, particularly the formation of the so-called Government of National Unity, or GNU. First, the uneven electoral landscape gives ZANU-PF an unfair advantage over CCC. When the MDC led by the late Morgan Tsvangirai became a very serious challenge to ZANU-PF after the 2000 general election, the Mugabe regime embarked on measures that would guarantee, not just promise, ZANU-PF would stay in power regardless of the election results. These measures were in fact predicted by former Labour Minister Kumbirai Kangai. Kangai called these measures democratic centrism. In short, I said to allow free and fair and internationally run elections only for the first elections conducted in 1980. Once ZANU won those elections, the party would implement the strategy of democratic centrism. That meant the door would be closed indefinitely to any free and fair elections in Zimbabwe in future. Between 1980 and 2000, ZANU-PF was practically the only viable party in Zimbabwe, and the ZANU-PF apparatchiki did not see the need to engage in any substantial vote rigging. Even when they lost all 15 seats in Matabeleland in the 1985 elections. At the time, Firebrand, ZANU official and Minister Innocent Kala, had predicted that as a result of the 5th Brigade operations, which killed more than 20,000 innocent civilians, the people of Matabeleland would be too scared to vote against ZANU-PF. But the opposite was in fact true. The people of Matabeleland, notwithstanding the 5th Brigade atrocities, voted overwhelmingly against ZANU and gave all the 15 seats to ZAPU under Joshua Nkomo. But ZANU was not worried about this loss because the party had a comfortable, substantial majority in parliament. However, Mugabe and ZANU-PF realized that ZAPU was a powerful political force in Matabeleland. This was one of the factors that led to negotiations for unity between ZANU and ZAPU, leading to the Unity Accord of 1987, which merged ZANU and ZAPU into ZANU-PF. But the real fact was ZANU completely swallowed ZAPU hook, line, and sinker. In the 1990 general elections, ZANU-PF won by 83% against Edgar Tekere's fledgling Zimbabwe United Movement, or ZUM party, which got only 17%. This gave ZANU-PF 117 of the 120 seats in parliament, a very comfortable majority for ZANU-PF indeed. In the 1995 general elections, ZANU-PF increased its majority by 1 to give it 118 seats out of the 120 seats in parliament. These were glory days for Mugabe and ZANU-PF. But they were not guaranteed to last forever. In fact, the 1995 general election results marked the end of Mugabe and ZANU-PF honeymoon with the Zimbabweans. The year 2000 was a new millennium, or the 21st century. Ancient prophecies about the new millennium hit home on the fortunes of ZANU-PF. The 2000 general elections were markedly different, very different. The one-year-old movement for democratic change, led by Morgan Tsvangirai and formed in 1999, captured the national dissatisfaction by Zimbabweans over the disastrous economic policies of ZANU-PF. MDC under Tsvangirai came within a whisker of overthrowing ZANU-PF in the 2000 general election. MDC gained 57 seats to ZANU-PF's 62 seats. Tsvangirai won 46.84% of the popular vote to Mugabe's 48.47%. This was indeed comparable to Chamisa and Mnangagwa in the 2018 presidential election. It was also the year MDC gained control of all urban councils in Zimbabwe. ZANU-PF was saved by the rural constituencies and earned the nickname the Rural Party instead of the ruling party. ZANU-PF was sent into a panic mode. It was now clear that the ruling party was headed for outright defeat in future elections. To ensure its survival, ZANU-PF launched the democratic centrism strategy. In an emotionally charged speech, Mugabe directed that ZANU-PF cannot and should not lose in any future elections. "Let this never happen again," he thunderously, thumping his desk, declared. He said thunderously, thumping his desk with his fist. What followed was a systematic program of brutalizing and harassing Zimbabweans through violence, electoral fraud, and rigging elections. These were the essential ingredients of a successful democratic centrism strategy. ZANU-PF democratic centrism strategy yielded positive results for the party in the 2005 elections. ZANU-PF won 78 seats against MDC's 41 seats. In a tersely worded statement, MDC described the election as the sham elections which had been marked by massive electoral fraud. The elections cannot be judged to be free and fair, the statement added. The distorted nature of the pre-election playing field and the failure to address core democratic deficit precluded a free and fair election. The MDC claimed that if the electoral environment was free and fair, it would have won 90 seats. Again, only if the vote had been free and fair. Because of the dire economic situation, Mugabe was forced to hold early elections in 2008. Afraid of losing the elections, Mugabe and ZANU-PF launched a savage and barbaric assault on MDC officials, candidates, and supporters. The politically motivated violence saw marauding ZANU-PF thugs armed with knives, guns, axes, clubs on a well-organized hunt for MDC supporters. It is estimated that more than 10,000 MDC supporters were abducted, tortured, or killed. Former high-ranking MDC official Sekai Holland gave a grim narrative of how she and other MDC officials were dragged from a church service and hauled into a police custody where they were severely beaten. She suffered broken ribs and other wounds. In a bizarre drama that resembles Mary Chimurenga today, Sekai Holland was barred by the Mugabe regime from flying out of the country to seek medical assistance abroad. She was only saved through the intervention of the Australian ambassador to Zimbabwe because her husband was Australian. Sekai Holland suffered 84 very deep bruises, muscle injuries, 3 broken ribs, a broken arm, a ruptured knee, and a broken leg. She gave a heart-rending account of what happened when she and other MDC officials, including Tsvangirai, were being savagely beaten and tortured. As they were being tortured, the MDC group used the Mahatma Gandhi's method of managing and resisting pain. This Gandhian strategy is the combination of truth, sacrifice, non-violence, selfless service, and cooperation. According to Gandhi, one should be brave and not to be a coward. He should present his views, suggestions, and thoughts without being violent. One should fight a war with the weapons of truth and non-violence. Gandhi said there is no God higher than truth. According to Gandhi's thoughts, non-violence is the ultimate solution to every kind of a problem in the world. In an interview with an online radio station during her recovery, Sekai Holland said she and her colleagues were captured by police who were constantly harassing and threatening them with severe violence. This was a psychological method of mentally torturing them as a first step towards brutally beating them. She then recounted how they reacted as they were being savagely and severely beaten. Sekai Holland said, they expected us to confess to whatever they wanted us to confess to. We did not confess. They expected us to cry. We did not cry. They expected us to scream in agony. We did not scream even though we were in great agony. They expected us to plead for mercy. We did not plead for mercy. They expected us to have an emotional breakdown. We were not emotionally broken down by the beatings. We remained resolute, quiet, and relied on each other's company for resilience, spiritual comfort, and strength. In the end, the police and ZANU-PF thugs ended up being emotionally drained, traumatized, and frustrated because we did not behave in the way they expected or wanted us to behave. Still, Mugabe and ZANU-PF lost the elections. despite the savage brutality against the MDC. In the 2008 general election, Tsvangirai won 47.9% of the vote and Mugabe 43.2% of the vote, necessitating a runoff, which was to be held in June that same year. ZANU-PF intensified its politically motivated assault on MDC officials and supporters. More supporters were being assaulted or killed almost every day. Tsvangirai announced eventually that he was withdrawing from the runoff, describing it as a violent sham and saying that his supporters risked being killed if they voted for him. Mugabe, as the only candidate, won 90% of the vote. But in parliament, MDC gained 42.3% against Mugabe's 45.84%. MDC, which was split, now had 100 seats to ZANU-PF's 99 seats. In a report, Human Rights Watch alleged that ZANU-PF members were setting up torture camps to systematically target, beat, and torture people suspected of having voted for the MDC, both to punish them and to pressure them into voting for Mugabe in a potential second round. The group asserted that there must be a high-level complicity in this and criticized SADC and Beki for inaction. According to Human Rights Watch, it interviewed over 30 people who had suffered injuries in those torture camps. Tendai Biti, speaking at a press conference in Johannesburg, described Zimbabwe as a war zone and urged the mobilization of United Nations organizations in the country, saying that the situation was no longer merely a political crisis, but a humanitarian crisis as well. According to BT, 500 MDC supporters had been attacked, 400 had been arrested. He also said 3,000 families had been displaced. Between March and June 2008, at least 153 MDC supporters were killed. Even Firebrand Inosnkala, one of the founders of the ZANU and a former defense minister, and who now had parted company with Mugabe, acknowledged ZANU-PF's politically motivated violence against MDC. In April 2008, Inosnkala appealed to Mugabe to retire because he had been rejected by the Zimbabweans. Said Nkala, "I have information from reliable sources that on April 1, everyone had the results, including those of the presidential elections. The president wanted to go, but there are people surrounding him who have committed heinous crimes against the people of Zimbabwe, and they are afraid of a change of guard," Nkala said in a statement. Nkala also said, "ZANU-PF was formed in my house in Harare, and what is happening now is not one of the reasons why ZANU-PF was formed. ZANU-PF has been hijacked by criminals and people who cannot be employed if they leave government. They are also holding Zimbabweans to ransom. The sham presidential runoff election of 2008 and 1 month delay in announcing the results led to an unprecedented regional and international interventions by the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. The United Nations Security Council held a session on the situation in Zimbabwe in April. Reportedly, the United States, European, and Latin American members of the Security Council wanted to send a special envoy to Zimbabwe. However, South Africa opposed this. Other interventions came from foreign ministers of the G8 group of countries, Human Rights Watch, South African President Jacob Zuma, UK Foreign Secretary David Miliband. The East Africa Law Society called an emergency Pan-African Citizens Consultative meeting to be held in Dar es Salaam to discuss the Zimbabwean problem. Also, the Evangelical Fellowship of Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe Catholic Bishops' Conference, and the Zimbabwe Council of Churches called on SADC, the African Union, and the United Nations to act to prevent the situation from deteriorating further, warning of the possibility of a genocide if they did not intervene. Even the pro-Mugabe ZANU-PF newspaper, The Herald, in its editorial on April 23, 2008, proposed a national unity government, which was eventually formed in February 2009. What historical lessons can be learned from the 2008 general election as Zimbabwe moved to 2023 election? 1. There is widespread dissatisfaction with ZANU-PF, and this has been the case since 2000. ZANU-PF has lost every election since 2000, and that is a fact. ZANU-PF has had to resort to violence, intimidation, and vote rigging to stay in power. The MDC resilience and participation in flawed elections has won it even more popular support. This explains why and how CCC, which was born 2 months before the March 26 by-election, won with a landslide. A concerted regional and international intervention can yield some results in redressing flawed and rigged elections, as shown in the formation of the Government of National Unity, the GNU, as it was called, of 2009, was not effective, however, in giving effective shared power to the MDC. But the same GNU was effective in showing what the MDC could achieve when given the opportunity. For example, the MDC finance minister in the GNU, Tendai Biti, hit the ground running by implementing harsh but necessary economic reforms. Biti's mantra was, "We eat only what we kill," marking the end of the ZANU-PF practice of balancing the budget by printing more money and reducing its value in the process. Before the GNU, Reserve Bank Governor Gideon Gono, who was described as Mugabe's banker, gained notoriety by reducing the numbers of zeros as the Zimbabwean dollar was in a free fall every day. It is "we eat only what we kill" policy yielded a progressively gradual turnaround of the country's economy. Political scientists are in general agreement that GNUs are a fragile, acrimonious, usually transitional arrangement with a high risk of disintegrating at the slightest opportunity. Zimbabwe's GNU can be dubbed as a marriage of convenience. The three political parties, that is ZANU-PF, MDC Tsvangirai, and MDC-M, were forced to this marriage of convenience by circumstances on ground, that is the political and economic turbulence within the country. Mugabe did not hesitate to take advantage of an improved economic climate. He called for general elections in 2013. To ensure the party's victory in the 2018 elections, ZANU-PF engaged in massive vote rigging. The Zimbabwe Election Support Network, or ZESNI, with its 7,000 monitors, listed many offenses, especially the tampering of electoral rolls. It was estimated that 1/3 of registered voters were either dead or aged 120 years. ZESNI estimated that up to 1 million names were invalid and an additional 1 million voters in urban areas were excluded from voting in the 2013 elections. Even the Electoral Commission also later reported that approximately 305,000 voters were turned away from the polls, with an additional 207,000 voters being assisted in courts in casting their ballots. There were also more than 100,000 centenarian ghost voters on the electoral vote roll. The election results were predictable. Robert Mugabe won 62% of the vote to claim a sixth term as president. Morgan Tsvangirai finished second with 34% of the vote. Mugabe's ZANU-PF party also dominated the parliamentary election, winning 196 seats to Tsvangirai's Movement for Democratic Change 76 seats. One big lesson from these past election experiences is that ZANU-PF is committed to rigging elections in its favor. That is the only way ZANU-PF can hope to survive, given that since 2000, Zimbabweans have massively rejected ZANU-PF. In the next letter from America, we will look at other factors that will impact positively and negatively on CCC chances of winning the 2023 election. Thank you for listening.
This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening.
Zimbabwe. Mukoma wako uchamuponda, uchimupondera nyaya yebato. Mukoma wako uchamuponda wani, uchimupondera nyaya yenyika. Hanzvadzi yako wakairova, uchirovera nyaya yebato. Sisi vako wakavarova, uchivarovera nyaya yebato. Baba wakavatsinga, uchivatsingira nyaya yebato. Mwana wako wakamutuka, uchimutukira nyaya yenyika. Ndiyo here Zimbabwe, ndiyo here Zimbabwe, ndiyo here Zimbabwe, ndiyo here Zimbabwe, ndiyo here